Erotic energy is not evil. It is not something to be shamed, nor is it something to be indulged blindly. It is raw power, a primal current that has shaped wars, written poems, built empires, and destroyed them all the same. It is the fire behind obsession, the restlessness behind genius, and the impulse that drives men either to create or collapse. Yet most modern men waste it. They don't transmute it, they leak it. They spill it into glowing screens, into empty affairs, into meaningless pursuits of flesh that leave them emptier than before. The man who does not understand erotic energy is not just at risk of failure, he is already failing. He is already enslaved. The tragedy is that erotic energy, when mastered, becomes a source of clarity, creation, and silent authority. But when left undisciplined, it turns into the very noose that strangles one's potential. That's the difference between the man who builds legacy and the one who becomes a footnote in someone else's story. Consider the teachings of the Shaolin monks, a brotherhood of discipline, serenity, and lethality. These were not weak men who rejected pleasure because they were timid. They were dangerous men who chose restraint because they understood the price of distraction. From an early age, Shaolin initiates were taught to treat their sexual energy as sacred, not sinful, sacred, something too powerful to be wasted, too valuable to be spent on momentary satisfaction. In traditional Chinese medicine and Taoist philosophy, this energy is known as Jing, the essence that fuels life, vitality, and creativity. To spill it carelessly is to lose your essence. To preserve it is to grow in spiritual power. This wasn't metaphysical fluff, it was embedded into their training. For hours each day, they meditated, struck wooden dummies, balanced on poles, fought blindfolded, and honed their bodies into weapons. But the real weapon was their mind, sharpened by abstinence, forged in silence. They didn't just master martial arts, they mastered themselves. Because a man who cannot say no to his urges can never say yes to his mission. Roger Scruton, a conservative philosopher and defender of Western tradition, offers a different but complementary perspective. In his view, erotic longing is not merely physical, it is metaphysical. It reaches into the soul. It seeks not just touch, but transcendence. The problem is that modernity has severed erotic energy from meaning. We've turned women into images, sex into commodity, and longing into addiction. Scruton argued that modesty, restraint, and romantic idealism were not social constraints. They were the civilizing forces that elevate man beyond the animal. He knew that when erotic energy is unchecked, it collapses into vulgarity. When it is refined, it becomes beauty, music, poetry, architecture, legacy. What the Shaolin monks do with abstinence, Scruton does with culture. Both understand that Eros is a fire, and if you don't give it structure, it burns everything in its path. But if you channel it, it can power an empire. Now take this into the arena of power. Picture a young man standing at the gates of his purpose, but distracted by the soft whispers of temptation. Maybe it's a woman who doesn't believe in him, but keeps him around just enough to drain his time. Maybe it's porn, draining his energy while feeding the illusion of conquest. Maybe it's his own unexamined cravings that he mistakes for motivation. In any of these cases, the energy meant for his legacy is being bled out of him daily. What if Caesar had fallen to these traps? What if Marcus Aurelius had spent his nights chasing concubines instead of confronting his own mind? They knew the truth. You don't fight desire head-on, you redirect it. You don't repress it, you repurpose it. The greatest among men do not escape temptation by accident. They outgrow it by necessity. Their mission becomes more seductive than the woman, their vision more intoxicating than the moment. Erotic energy is not just about sex, it is about the hunger behind the eyes, the pulse behind the dreams, the restless drive that demands expression. The question is not whether you have this energy, you do. The question is, What are you doing with it? Are you building or bleeding, creating or craving? A man cannot serve two masters. He either obeys his lust or leads it. And leadership begins with silence. Like the monks who meditated through pain, like Scruton who elevated longing into beauty, like Caesar who used restraint as strategy. The first step to greatness is to guard your energy like a king guards his throne. Because that throne, your future, will not survive if the enemy within is never silenced. In the alchemy of lust, you'll be taken deep into the ancient and forgotten discipline of sexual transmutation, a principle once reserved for monks, warriors, kings, and creators. Silence is not weakness. In the world of power, silence is calculation. It is control. And for a man who seeks to rise, erotic energy must first be silenced, not suppressed with shame, but subdued with strategy. The modern man is being trained to believe that pleasure is the goal of life. He is being programmed to equate arousal with freedom and indulgence with power. But nothing could be further from the truth. True power begins the moment a man masters the ability to delay his gratification, redirect his hunger, and deny the enemy the privilege of knowing what he truly wants. In this way, erotic energy becomes not a drug, but a sword. And silence, as demonstrated by figures like Julius Caesar and thinkers like Roger Scruton, becomes the sheath that conceals it until the moment of impact. Roger Scruton understood the philosophical consequences of ungoverned eroticism. In a society that celebrates exposure over elegance, he argued fiercely for the return of modesty. He believed that erotic desire, when surrounded by mystery, ritual, and restraint, becomes more than biological impulse. It becomes sacred. He warned that when sex is cheapened, men become consumers rather than creators. They become dependent on the approval of women rather than dangerous with purpose. Scruton called pornography the negation of love, not because of its explicitness, but because of its emptiness. It reduces the soul to surfaces. He called for a return to courtship, not as outdated tradition, but as psychological structure. When men must work to earn a woman's heart, their erotic energy becomes focused, productive, and elevated. When everything is instant and available, the man himself becomes disposable, because he has nothing within that's been forged through delay. In the realm of war and strategy, Julius Caesar was a master of silence. Not just the silence of voice, the silence of impulse. Historians note that Caesar, though surrounded by opportunities for indulgence, rarely allowed himself to be seen as a man consumed by pleasure. His restraint was not a lack of appetite. It was a demonstration of control. He understood the battlefield of optics. That power is lost the moment people can read your hunger. The moment you telegraph your desire for women, for validation, for approval, you become predictable. And the predictable man is the easiest to manipulate. Caesar kept his ambition cloaked behind calculated charm. His desires were rarely stated, but always fulfilled, because he made the world move around his silence. He was not led by Eros, he led with it. This is where erotic energy becomes strategy. It's not about abstinence for morality's sake. It's about momentum. Every man has a reservoir of drive, and most let it leak through casual glances, weak habits, and wasted nights. But the strategic man hoards that drive. He redirects it into precision, into business, into skill, into calculated moves that make women curious, not comfortable. This man becomes unpredictable, magnetic, dangerous, not because he's reckless, but because he's refined. You don't know what he's thinking. You don't know what he wants. And that silence makes people lean in. Caesar once said, "It is better to create than to learn. Creating is the essence of life." He was not addicted to women. He made women addicted to the mystery of his mission. Here is where Scruton and Caesar align, one in philosophy, the other in practice. Both understood that erotic energy is not to be wasted in expression, it is to be hidden, until it is powerful. Scruton elevated longing into beauty. Caesar elevated silence into dominance. The man who combines both is unstoppable. He walks into a room and speaks little, but everything about his presence says, "I don't need you to want me. I want the world." This is the edge of the masculine ideal, the ability to feel deeply and yet act deliberately, to have desire but not be ruled by it, to know what you want but not broadcast it. Strategy is the art of concealment, and nothing must be more concealed than your erotic energy. That is your power, your fire, your myth. The average man wears his lust on his sleeve and is treated accordingly. The superior man wears his silence like armor, and the world gives him everything it thinks he doesn't need. Death of desire, the Stoic's path to cold clarity. This is not a guide. This is not self-help. This is war. Kill the need. Master the mind. The final transformation begins here. The man who learns to master erotic energy is no longer just a man. He becomes a force, a presence, a legacy in motion. Because erotic energy, when not leaked or wasted, becomes fuel for invention, vision, and unstoppable drive. You can see it in the eyes of every legendary builder. They have that fire. But it's not wild or chaotic. It's cold, focused, tamed. It's erotic energy that has been alchemized, turned into gold through discipline, turned into strategy through silence, turned into legacy through deliberate action. The modern man has been taught to give this power away for free, to drain himself chasing women, arguing online, watching others live out fantasies. But that man will never build anything worth remembering, because while he is busy burning for pleasure, the disciplined man is burning for purpose. The first step in this alchemy is a decision. I will no longer be a slave to my urges. That declaration alone puts you in the top 5% of men. Most will never say it. Most are terrified to confront how much energy they bleed daily through distraction. Not just sexual release, but the endless validation seeking, the fantasy chasing, the scrolling, the talking. The erotic man must become the silent architect, the one who builds quietly, moves privately, and lives intentionally. This is what the Shaolin monks understood. They had no time for cheap pleasures, because every drop of energy was accounted for. Their training was a ritual. Their restraint was power. They understood that desire was not the enemy. Untrained desire was. They transmuted lust into strength, aggression into clarity, chaos into rhythm. You must do the same. Your gym, your business, your craft. These must become temples where your energy is invested, not wasted. But how? How do you rechannel something so overwhelming? Start with rituals. Discipline is not just about abstaining. It's about replacing. If you remove pleasure, you must replace it with progress. Begin your mornings in silence. Journal your desires and redirect them. Replace screen-induced arousal with creation, writing, building, lifting, learning. Redirect the craving for a woman into building a world that draws high-quality women into orbit. Not because you chase them, but because you outgrew their reach. Create systems. Track your energy leaks. Fast from pleasure like a warrior training for war. Let every urge become a signal, not to consume, but to produce. That's transmutation. You must also remember this. The erotic man who does not speak of his desires becomes the man others desire to follow, because his presence hints at depth, his silence demands attention. Julius Caesar understood this. His restraint was legendary. Even when he took lovers, it was with strategy, not submission. He never let pleasure distract from power. His movements were deliberate, his timing calculated. He didn't need to chase because he was already being watched. The less he revealed, the more the world speculated. That's the paradox of masculine eroticism. The more you silence it, the louder your presence becomes. The more you control it, the more others want to feel it. Not because you begged for attention, but because you became attention itself. And this is your task, to become the man who others feel before he even speaks. A man who walks into a room and doesn't need validation because he already validated himself in silence. The kind of man whose work speaks louder than his mouth ever could. The kind of man who has mastered the inner war and now moves like a general commanding time itself. Erotic energy is not here to destroy you. It is here to awaken you, but only if you can face it, only if you can tame it, only if you can silence the flesh, see clearly, and build ruthlessly. This is the final truth. You were never meant to kill your desire. You were meant to crown it, to place it under your rule and put it to work. You were meant to turn that hunger into empire. You were meant to turn lust into legacy. Thus remember, we are Indeceptor. Becoming Indeceptor is the code they never wanted you to learn. A psychological war map for men, forbidden teachings fused with modern strategy for influence, dominance, and self-mastery. If you want peace, prepare for war. Welcome to the Indeceptor Archive, where the undeceived rise. No ads, no distractions, just pure, uninterrupted power. As a crusader of the archive, you gain infinite access to every video, every truth, every strategy, without censorship, delay, or interruption. New drops daily, delivered to you before the world sees them. Raw, unfiltered, elite. Indeceptions.com